Dímelo mi gente, hoy estuvimos en los ensayos del Super Bowl de Bad Bunny y esto fue lo que sucedió.
Honestly, thank you to the people who didn't believe in me. Like a month ago, I won a 500 title and people said I would stop at that. 2 weeks ago, I won 1,000 titles.
Biggest talking point of the week so far was Taylor Townsend's win over Elena Ostapenko.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you saw what happened at the end of the match and what your thoughts are on it.
Coco Gauff breaks silence. The Super Bowl halftime war that divided America. Welcome back to Chatterbox, where we don't just spill the tea. We brew the whole pot and serve it piping hot. And folks, do we have a steaming cup of chaos for you today? If you thought the action on the field at Super Bowl 60 was intense, you clearly weren't paying attention to the cultural nuclear war happening during the halftime break. We're talking pyrotechnics, political showdowns, a rival broadcast crashing the party, and now, tennis superstar Coco Gauff dropping the mic with a take so brutally honest it's rattling both sides of the aisle. This isn't just sports drama anymore. This is American culture eating itself alive on live television, and we've got front row seats to the most spectacular implosion in entertainment history. Buckle up, Chatterbox fam, because we are diving deep into the most chaotic, divided, and absolutely wild Super Bowl halftime controversy ever recorded. We're talking Bad Bunny versus Kid Rock. We're talking the NFL versus Turning Point USA. We're talking about a moment when America literally could not agree on what to watch for 15 minutes during a football game. And right in the middle of this cultural tornado stands Coco Gauff, looking around at the madness and asking the question we're all thinking. What on earth is happening to us? Let's rewind and set the stage for this absolute disaster of epic proportions. It's February 8th, 2026. Super Bowl 60 at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. The NFL, continuing its lucrative partnership with Roc Nation, makes what they surely thought was a slam dunk decision. They tapped the biggest artist on the entire planet to headline the Apple Music halftime show. Enter Bad Bunny, the king of Latin tradscape. It was a bold move. It was a historic move. It was the first time in Super Bowl history that the halftime show would be headlined by a solo artist performing primarily in Spanish. The NFL brass were probably high-fiving each other in their luxury boxes, congratulating themselves on being so progressive, so inclusive, so in touch with the changing demographics of America. They saw dollar signs in the form of international viewership, streaming numbers that would make shareholders weep with joy, and a cultural moment that would cement the Super Bowl as not just an American tradition, but a global phenomenon. But here's the thing about bold moves in 2026 America. You can't make one without someone building a bonfire of rage in response. Because naturally, we can't have nice things without a fight. We can't celebrate achievement without someone claiming it's an attack. We can't enjoy a concert without turning it into a referendum on national identity. Enter Turning Point USA, stage right, carrying gasoline and matches. The conservative powerhouse organization, now led by Erica Kirk following the tragic and shocking death of her husband Charlie Kirk last September, decided they weren't just going to boycott the NFL. Oh no. That would be too passive, too quiet, too easy to ignore. They were going to compete with it. They were going to build their own halftime show with blackjack and, well, you know the rest. They announced the All-American Halftime Show, a rival digital broadcast that would stream live on YouTube, Rumble, and conservative networks across the nation, headlined by none other than the self-proclaimed American badass himself, Kid Rock. Think about that for a second. We live in a timeline where the Super Bowl halftime show has competition, where Americans have to choose which version of entertainment they want to consume during a football game, where even 15 minutes of music has become a loyalty test, a political statement, a line in the sand that determines which tribe you belong to. So, for 15 minutes on that Sunday night, America effectively split in two. On one screen, you had Bad Bunny bringing the sun-soaked beaches of Puerto Rico to the Bay Area, complete with enough pyrotechnics to simulate a volcanic eruption and dance moves that would make your grandmother clutch her pearls. On the other screen, you had Kid Rock and a lineup of country stars throwing a patriotic tribute in a studio in Atlanta, draped in enough American flags to cover a football field, delivering exactly what their audience wanted. Familiar, comfortable, English only, red, white, and blue entertainment. Two stages. Two visions of America. Two completely incompatible realities playing out simultaneously. It was like watching a national divorce happen in real time, with half the country tuning into one stream and the other half tuning into another, and both sides absolutely convinced they were on the right side of history. That's the fair, balanced, mature beyond her years Coco we've come to know. The performance wasn't for her. Maybe she's not blasting Un Verano Sin Ti during her training sessions or getting down to dembo rhythms in the locker room. But she respects the hustle. She understands what it means to perform on the biggest stage in the world. She gets that Bad Bunny earned that spot through talent and hard work and massive global popularity. But then she pivoted, and this is where she dropped the hammer that sent shockwaves through both camps. I fault the NFL for putting him in that position, she continued, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone lean in, and Turning Point for feeling the need to come out and create an alternative for people to watch. You know, it's just tough. She paused. You could feel the weight of that pause even through the screen. I didn't understand any of it. Let's unpack that nuclear bomb of a statement, because those 6 words, I didn't understand any of it, are doing about 17 different jobs at once. On the surface, sure, Gauff is talking about the Spanish lyrics. Let's be completely honest here. A large chunk of the viewing audience probably needed subtitles to follow what Bad Bunny was saying. The man performed almost entirely in Spanish, dropping maybe 20 words of English total during his 13-minute set. For millions of Americans whose only exposure to Spanish is ordering at Chipotle, it was probably like watching a really expensive, really loud concert where they couldn't understand the words. That's just a fact, not a judgment. But Coco Gauff is smarter than that. She's not just talking about language barriers. She's talking about the entire situation, the absurdity of it all, the manufactured outrage, the performative patriotism, the cynical calculations, the cultural fragmentation, the inability of Americans to simply enjoy something without turning it into a political statement. She's calling out the NFL for potentially setting Bad Bunny up to fail. Think about it. The league knew this would be controversial. They knew that booking a primarily Spanish-language artist for the most-watched television event in America would anger a significant portion of their fan base. They knew the backlash was coming. They could have given him more support, more context, more build-up. They could have educated the audience about who he is and why he matters. But they didn't, because controversy drives engagement, and engagement drives revenue. They threw Bad Bunny into a politically charged buzzsaw and walked away counting their money while he absorbed the criticism. And she's calling out Turning Point USA for fracturing the audience and turning a football game into yet another battleground in the never-ending culture war. Why did there need to be a competing show? Why couldn't people who don't like Bad Bunny just change the channel, go grab a beer, talk to their friends, scroll their phones like they've done during every boring halftime show in history? Why did disliking one artist's performance have to become a patriotic duty that required a massive counter-programming effort? Coco Gauff is basically standing in the middle of this battlefield and screaming at both armies. Can't we just watch a concert? Can't we just enjoy a football game? Why does literally everything have to be a statement about who we are as Americans? Why can't Bad Bunny be popular and Kid Rock be popular without it meaning something deeper about the soul of the nation? It's a sentiment that is resonating with millions of Americans who are tired of the constant polarization. The people who are exhausted by having to check whether their coffee choice is conservative or liberal. The folks who just want to watch sports without political commentary. The Americans who remember when you could dislike an artist because their music wasn't your style, not because they represented some existential threat to your way of life. But of course, in the world of 2026, there is no neutral ground. Switzerland doesn't exist anymore. You picked a stream on Super Bowl Sunday, and whether you meant to or not, you picked a side. You either watched Bad Bunny and signaled you're cool with the changing demographics of America, or you watched Kid Rock and signaled you're holding on to traditional values. There was no third option. There was no, I'm just here for the football. Coco Gauff wanted that third option. She wanted to watch some football, maybe see a halftime show she enjoyed, maybe just relax for a few hours on a Sunday. Instead, she got a culture war delivered with a side of chicken wings and a choice between 2 versions of America that apparently can't coexist anymore. But the moment everyone is talking about, the moment that likely fueled Coco Gauff's "I didn't understand any of it" comment, the moment that became the flashpoint for the entire controversy, was the La Casita segment. Midway through the performance, The massive stage setup transformed into a replica of a traditional Puerto Rican wooden house, or casita. Not a stylized, sanitized version. A real, detailed, lived-in representation of working-class Puerto Rican life. And what unfolded was essentially a house party dropped onto the 50-yard line of an NFL stadium. It was chaotic in the most joyous way imaginable if you understood the cultural context, and utterly bewildering if you didn't. There were domino tables set up with older men in guayabera shirts playing and arguing. There were grandmothers dancing, not as backup dancers, but as actual characters in this scene, moving with the kind of unself-conscious joy that only comes from decades of practice. There were people cooking on stage, actual cooking, with pots and pans and the smell of sofrito somehow wafting through the stadium. There were kids running around. There were couples dancing close. There was loud conversation in rapid-fire Spanish happening between songs. For fans of Bad Bunny, for people who grew up in Puerto Rican households or Caribbean communities, for anyone who's ever been to an actual party in San Juan or the Bronx or any of the places where this culture thrives, it was a masterpiece. It was representation on the highest possible stage. It was seeing your life, your family, your culture treated as worthy of the Super Bowl spotlight. It was a middle finger to the idea that you have to assimilate to succeed, that you have to sand down your edges and become American enough to be acceptable. It was authentic. It was proud. It was defiant. But for his detractors, and oh boy were there many, less polite observations about immigration and language, and this is America, speak English. President Donald Trump, never one to stay quiet during a Super Bowl or any other major cultural event, took to Truth Social before the fireworks had even finished. His review? About as scathing as you'd expect from someone who has made cultural grievance a cornerstone of his political brand. Absolutely terrible. Trump posted while Bad Bunny was still on stage. One of the worst halftime shows ever. Maybe the worst in history. People are saying it's the worst. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying. The dancing is disgusting, especially for young children to watch. A slap in the face to our country. Why can't we have American performers at American events? Very sad. Trump's comments poured gasoline on a fire that was already raging out of control. The post got shared millions of times within minutes. Conservative media outlets turned it into headlines. Liberal outlets turned those headlines into counter-headlines. The culture war industrial complex kicked into overdrive, churning out hot takes and think pieces and reaction videos faster than anyone could possibly consume them. The president claimed he had never heard of Bad Bunny, despite the fact that Bad Bunny has been the most streamed artist on Spotify globally for multiple years running, has won multiple Grammy Awards, and has collaborated with American artists from Drake to Cardi B to J Balvin. It was a classic Trumpian move, positioning himself as the voice of real America, while pretending that one of the most famous entertainers on planet Earth was some unknown commodity that the liberal elite forced upon unsuspecting Americans. It was a clash of demographics so stark you could draw it on a map. The old guard of traditional American media, the people who remember when the Super Bowl halftime show was marching bands and Up With People, versus the new, globalized, streaming-dominant, multilingual youth culture that sees nothing weird about the biggest artist in the world singing in Spanish. And let's talk about Trump's disgusting comment for a second, because this is where things get really interesting from a cultural perspective. The president was almost certainly referring to the perreo, the grinding dance style that is absolutely central to reggaeton. Perreo is sensual, it's sexual, it involves close contact and hip movements that definitely push the boundaries of what's traditionally acceptable on network television during family viewing hours. Then came the music, and it was exactly what you'd expect if you've spent any time in conservative America. Lee Brice and Brantley Gilbert delivered acoustic, heartfelt sets that focused on the holy trinity of conservative values: faith, family, and the flag. Lee Brice performed I Drive Your Truck, a song about grief and memory that hit differently in the context of Charlie Kirk's recent death. Brantley Gilbert did The Ones That Like Me, an anthem about being proud of who you are and not apologizing for your values. Gabby Barrett brought some youth and energy with I Hope and the Good Ones, songs about relationships and traditional values that have made her a crossover star. It was safe. It was familiar. It was music that millions of Americans listened to every single day. It was the soundtrack of rural America, of small towns, of people who feel like the entertainment industry has left them behind in favor of coastal elites and global audiences. And it was exactly what their audience wanted. The YouTube chat was moving so fast it was unreadable, but the sentiment was clear. Finally, music I can understand. This is what the Super Bowl halftime should be. God bless America. R.I.P. Charlie Kirk. But the main event, the reason most people were watching, was Kid Rock. Love him or hate him, and there's really no middle ground with Kid Rock. The man knows how to work a crowd. He's been doing this for 30 years. He's sold millions of records. He's played every venue from dive bars to stadiums. He understands spectacle and knows exactly what his fans want from him. Kid Rock came out like a man on a mission. Wearing a fur coat that probably violated several animal rights laws, a MAGA hat tilted just so, American flag pants that would make Uncle Sam jealous, and enough jewelry to stock a pawn shop. He looked exactly like the caricature that his critics accuse him of being. And he absolutely owned it. He launched directly into American Badass, his biggest hit, a song that samples Metallica's Sad But True, and has become an unofficial anthem for a certain type of American who sees themselves as rebels against an increasingly politically correct society. The studio audience went absolutely insane. People were on their feet, fists in the air, singing every word. Kid Rock didn't have Bad Bunny's budget. He didn't have 10,000 fireworks or a field transformed into a Caribbean beach. He didn't have hundreds of professional dancers or state-of-the-art lighting rigs. What he had was an electric guitar, a whole lot of attitude, and an audience that was ready to party specifically because they felt like the NFL had abandoned them. In a direct jab at the NFL that got the biggest crowd reaction of the night, Kid Rock stopped mid-song, walked to the front of the stage, looked directly into the camera, and shouted, "We don't need no translators here. We speak freedom. We speak American. And we ain't apologizing for it." The crowd in the Atlanta studio went absolutely wild. It was red meat for the base, exactly the kind of statement they wanted to hear. It validated their feelings that the NFL had chosen globalism over patriotism, that Bad Bunny represented some kind of cultural invasion rather than just being a talented artist who happens to sing in Spanish. The moment was clipped and shared millions of times across social media within minutes. Conservative accounts celebrated it as Kid Rock destroying wokeness. Liberal accounts mocked it as xenophobic nonsense. Nobody's mind was changed, but everyone had content to share with their echo chambers. Kid Rock continued through his set, hitting the nostalgic notes that his fans wanted, Boet Daba, Cowboy, all summer long. He brought out surprise guests from the world of conservative entertainment. There were rumors he might bring out Trump himself, but that didn't materialize, probably because Trump was busy live-tweeting his hatred of Bad Bunny from Mar-a-Lago. However, the technical side of things left something to be desired, especially compared to the slick NFL production happening simultaneously. Viewers on YouTube and Rumble noted that the audio mixing was rough, with Kid Rock's vocals sometimes drowned out by the drums and guitar. The camera work was occasionally shaky, cutting to weird angles at awkward moments. This wasn't the billion-dollar NFL production machine. This was a scrappy alternative broadcast put together in a few weeks. Let's start with the turning point show. During Lee Brice's acoustic set, he was playing a guitar that looked beautiful but unremarkable to most viewers. But according to multiple sources close to the production, that guitar was one of Charlie Kirk's personal instruments. Charlie had been an avid guitar collector and a massive country music fan. He'd learned to play as a kid and had accumulated a collection of vintage and custom guitars over the years. The decision to have Lee Brice use Charlie's guitar wasn't announced. There was no big reveal or emotional speech about it. It was just there, a silent tribute that only people close to Charlie would recognize. It added a layer of genuine grief and remembrance to what critics dismissed as nothing more than a political stunt. For the people in that Atlanta studio, for the Turning Point staff who had worked with Charlie for years, for his family and close friends, seeing that guitar on stage meant something profound. It was a connection to someone they'd lost, a way of keeping his presence in the room, even though he couldn't be there physically. It humanizes the whole thing in a way that the political coverage misses. These weren't just conservative activists trying to own the libs or score political points. These were people mourning a leader, celebrating his memory, and trying to honor what he built. You can disagree with their politics, you can think the rival halftime show was a bad idea, but you can't deny the genuine emotion behind it. Meanwhile, over on the NFL side, Bad Bunny was making his own subtle statements that most viewers completely missed. Did you catch what he was wearing? If you're not deeply immersed in fashion or Puerto Rican culture, you probably thought it was just another elaborate designer outfit, the kind of thing pop stars were to make a visual impact. And on the surface, it was a stunning custom ensemble with intricate embroidery, bright colors, and a silhouette that photographed beautifully for the massive LED screens. But eagle-eyed fashionistas and cultural commentators realized something important. It was actually a deconstructed and reimagined version of a Jibaro outfit, the traditional clothing of Puerto Rican farmers and mountain dwellers. The Jibaro represents the working-class roots of Puerto Rican culture, the people who worked the land, who maintained traditions, who built the island's identity long before it became a tourist destination or a source of global pop stars. By wearing a high-fashion interpretation of Jibaro clothing on the Super Bowl stage, Bad Bunny was making a statement that probably went over most people's heads, but meant everything to Puerto Ricans watching. I haven't forgotten where I came from. I haven't abandoned my roots just because I'm famous. I'm bringing the working class of my island to the biggest stage in the world. It was a silent nod to his community, even as he performed in a stadium filled with billionaires and corporate sponsors. It was his way of saying that this moment wasn't just about him. It was about representing people who usually don't get represented at this level. Two shows, two hidden messages, two completely different worlds operating on completely different frequencies. And most people didn't even notice because we were too busy fighting about whether the performances were good or bad, American or un-American, patriotic or offensive. That's the tragedy of this whole situation. Both performances had depth and meaning and genuine emotion behind them. Both were trying to honor something larger than just entertainment. Both had moments that would have resonated if people had been open to seeing them. But instead, we turned it into a war where you had to pick a side, where appreciating one meant rejecting the other, where nuance died in favor of tribal loyalty. Coco Gauff was right. It is tough. It's exhausting. It's sad. And it's where we are. So what happens next? Does this Super Bowl controversy fade into history as just another weird moment in a weird decade? Or does it represent something bigger and more permanent about American culture? The pessimistic view, and let's be honest, it's probably the realistic view, is that this is the new normal. Every major cultural event will now have a mainstream version and an alternative version, and Americans will choose which one aligns with their political identity. We'll have liberal Super Bowls and conservative Super Bowls, progressive Oscars and traditional Oscars, left-wing news and right-wing news, Democratic social media and Republican social media. And somewhere in the middle of it all stands Coco Gauff, 21 years old, exhausted, confused, and speaking for millions of Americans who just want to enjoy a football game without it becoming a political statement. She didn't understand any of it. And honestly, neither do we. All right, Chatterbox fam, we want to hear from you, and we mean really hear from you. Because this story doesn't end with us. It continues with the conversation you're about to have in the Civil War. Or do you think one side was justified and the other was completely wrong? Was Bad Bunny's performance a groundbreaking masterpiece that went over people's heads? Or was it a confusing mess that alienated the core Super Bowl tribes that can't even enjoy the same entertainment anymore? Drop your hottest takes in the comments below. Tell us which show you watched and why. Tell us if you think Coco Gauff nailed it or missed the point. Tell us if you're exhausted by the culture wars or if you think picking sides is necessary. We want the real, unfiltered opinions because that's what Chatterbox is all about. Creating a space where we can have these conversations without everyone losing their minds. And while you're down there in the comments getting ready to type your manifesto, do us a huge favor. Smash that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive into the most chaotic halftime controversy in history. Hit subscribe to Chatterbox so you never miss another breakdown of the cultural moments that are defining our weird, divided, absolutely fascinating era. And make sure you ring that notification bell so you're the first to know when we drop our next video. Because trust us, if this Super Bowl taught us anything, it's that the drama never stops, and we'll be here to cover every wild second of it. Share this video with your friends, especially the ones who watched the other halftime show. Let's get the conversation going across the divide. Let's see if we can talk about this stuff without it turning into World War III in the group chat. Until next time, Chatterbox fam, keep your minds open, keep your opinions honest, and keep talking. Because in a world that's trying to split us into opposing camps, the simple act of having a real conversation might be the most radical thing we can do.